In The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Zelda gets a starring role, and with it, her very own Hyrule Field theme. In this video, I'll talk about 7 things that make this theme a perfect little melody. Number 1, fan service. In just these first 8 simple bars, there are at least 3 references to music from past games. In the Overworld theme from Link's Awakening, we have this classic leap from G down to D. But in Zelda's theme, we take the opposite approach and leap up from G to D. It's so simple, but with that one tiny little difference, the composer has already told the story of how the roles of hero and captive have reversed. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the pitches are still G and D. They didn't even change the key. Another reference to Link's Awakening is this dotted 8th note rhythm, which in both cases is unique and interesting, but only appears one single time in 4 bars. And it wouldn't be Zelda's theme without a reference to Zelda's Lullaby. But it's there in such a subtle way, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you missed it. Of course, there are some ways that Zelda and Link's themes are different. For example, while Link's theme is very active and rhythmic, Zelda's is more legato and lyrical. There are plenty of other differences, which we'll get into. A notable one is the meter, so let's talk about that next. Number 2, rhythm. The melody is a 3/4 meter, which for a bold adventure theme is actually a pretty unusual choice. Link's theme is 4/4, which is much more standard. Usually, I think for action adventure themes, we expect a bold march forward. 3/4 is light and more graceful, which seems like the right choice for a princess. Another interesting thing about the rhythm is how we have this strong emphasis on beat 2. It's common in 3/4 to accent beat 1 and put a slight accent on beat 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. But here, the composer is emphasizing 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Notice how that long gap between 2 and the next bar gives the theme this constant feeling of pulling forward. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, as opposed to the more solid 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. Number 3, period form. If you've seen my videos before, you know I love musical form, and especially the small forms of little melodies like this. In this case, we have a nice 8-bar period. It starts with a 2-bar basic idea, which gets followed by a 2-bar contrasting idea. Think of it like a question and answer, and we call these first 4 bars the antecedent. The antecedent is followed by the consequent. We come back to the basic idea with just a tiny variation, which we'll talk about in a bit. And finally, we round it off with a cadence, which in this case happens to be a half cadence. I talk to a lot of students who are nervous about using a standard cookie cutter form like this in their own music, as if it will be too boring or too predictable. But your audience doesn't care. In fact, using a solid and well-worn form is doing them a favor. It helps give the melody shape, direction, and tell a meaningful story. When you first heard this theme, were you offended that it was in period form? I doubt it. Number 4, non-chord tones. Another way that we get this masculine versus feminine contrast between Link and Zelda's themes is with the way the composer accents non-chord tones. I have a series on choosing chords for a melody, and the first step for beginners is to emphasize the chord tones, meaning that the melody note should be one of the pitches in the chords you're using. In bar 2, the chord is G sus4, which means our available chord tones are G, C, or D. But on beat 1 of bar 2, we have an accented F sharp before resolving to the G. And on beat 1 of bar 4, we have B before making its way down to A. Both of these are examples of accented non-chord tones, which are dissonances that then resolve a beat later. In this case, they're called appoggiaturas, but the main point is that they come from outside the chord, which gives the melody a much more colorful yearning. Here's what it would sound like if we took those appoggiaturas away and only used the chord tones. It's not as good, right? Number 5, the skeleton. That last point leads us to the next point, which is how underneath the surface of the melody, there's actually a very simple and straightforward skeleton. Let's go back to just the first 4 bars of Link's theme for a second. If we reduce the melody down to just the strongest pitch of each bar, we get an outline of G, D, G, D. Zelda's theme actually has a similar structure. In this case, it's G, G, D, A. The entire underlying structure of the melody is built around octaves, fourths, and fifths, very bold, open intervals. So even though those appoggiaturas give the theme a lyrical and colorful surface, underneath it all, we actually still have a very strong and sturdy outline. Zelda can hold her own, after all. Number 6, minimal changes. One of the most impressive things about the way this theme is constructed is how the two halves of the period, the antecedent and the consequent, are nearly identical. We have just enough little changes to keep it interesting and feeling like the melody moves forward. The first change is this leap in bar 5. The first time we heard the basic idea, we had a leap from G up to D. The second time, however, we leap up to E. Just this one little step is enough to lift the melody up and give us a sense of direction towards the cadence. Another tiny change is in the contrasting idea. The first time we go down to the Zelda's Lullaby reference, but the second time we go up to it. It's the exact same notes, it's just in a different register. When I tell my students they are overthinking it, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So many of them seem to think that variation means to come up with some completely new idea every 2 seconds, when really it's about these tiny little changes, small enough that the listener can recognize them and just big enough to feel like the melody is going somewhere. Number 7, simple harmony. Finally, let's talk about the harmony. First of all, it's very simple, sticking entirely to diatonic chords. Just look at this art style, which is freaking adorable. Would it make sense to have dissonant polytonality in the open world theme? Of course not, which is why the theme sticks with chords that are comfortable and familiar in the key. The first half of the period actually stays even simpler, with G grounded firmly in a tonic pedal in the bass for the entire first 4 bars. We just go back and forth between G and G sus. The fact that the bass and chords stay stuck in place is exactly why it feels interesting when we get a new chord in bar 6. Finally, there's a sense of movement, which is perfect for driving us to the cadence and making the second half contrast with the first. Yet another example of how these simple little things work. If you want your harmony to be flowing and moving forward, contrast it with harmony that stays stuck in place. All right, I think I've wrung enough out of just these 8 little bars. Big shout out to my friend Gavin Leeper, who's the one who suggested I take a look at this theme. If you don't know about it yet, Gavin and I have 2 courses on writing music for anime and video games in the style of Japanese composers. They're on sale right now for Black Friday, so definitely check them out at Master the Score. I'll put a link down below the like button. And if you're hungry for more Zelda videos, don't worry, I've got you covered with these right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.